Hello, this is Jim Stockstill, bringing you another program entitled The Handwriting on the Wall. And I want to talk about my experience today. I'm 71 years old, so it makes me older than most of you. And I'm still kicking, still going strong. At 69, I married a Filipina lady, and we have a young baby who's at 71 now. We have a young baby and a girl, and she's 1 year in November. So I have to keep working somehow, making money for the next 20 years to get her through college. And then I have a young son who's 10 that I've adopted. So I have purpose. And another purpose I have is to make a few disciples, or at least to open the eyes of a few people. I made 2 videos today. This second one I'm making right now. The first one I said that all the stuff material was mine. Well, it's mine in the sense that I've read a lot of people. I've read studied under the greatest prophets, I think, on this earth, and I read some of the greatest academicians, and I've studied both spiritually and intellectually, but this is my research. This is what I've compiled. I was 18 years old when President Kennedy was assassinated. That night, the day that he was assassinated, that night we had the high school play, which was a big thing back in 1964. The high school play was, and I had the lead role for the first act of it, and then my character was murdered, and the next 2 acts I set out and watched. But anyhow, the day that Kennedy was assassinated, the United States was just brokenhearted. It was sad. We loved Kennedy. He was young, he was strong, he was virile, and he could communicate. He was like Ronald Reagan. If you ever listened to Ronald Reagan could really communicate. But Kennedy could communicate, and he looked young, and the young people related to him real well, and the people of the world related to him real well. So he was a popular president, and we'd already gone through the Cuban invasion, which Russia was sending missiles and going to put them in Cuba, and he'd backed down Khrushchev at that time, and so that's the way the world was during that time. We had some real crisis. We could have had some war right there on our doorsteps, and so we loved John F. Kennedy, and Jackie Kennedy was quite a lady. She represented the United States very well, and they had young children, and his son John, who later was also assassinated, because he probably would have been a president. Just recently, he probably had a future in politics. But anyhow, Kennedy was assassinated. There was gloom. The teacher shouldn't have had that play. I'm not going to name the teacher. I never did like him. Matter of fact, I got into a couple of alterations with him when I was already with a student, an 18-year-old student, and I would have canceled the play, and I think he should have canceled it. The only people that came was our parents. It was a big high school. I think maybe we had 200 people come, and we couldn't break the gloom. But anyhow, So, I wanted to tell you that I was there, I was living at the time. And, but if you ever study John Kennedy, he talked about the New World Order. He may not exactly call it the New World Order, but he said it was there was an organization that was intent on conquering the world, that was highly financed and very complex. And he was talking about the New World Order at that time. And so Kennedy had plans, and his plans were to do away with the CIA and the Internal Revenue Service. Now the CIA was put together, was organized and brought together by George Bush Sr. He founded the CIA. Now, George Bush Sr.'s father, I think his name was Patrick Bush, he'd been a banker during World War II, and they closed down his bank for aiding and abetting the enemy. In other words, George Bush Sr., look it up. I had one person go off on me. I can't believe our government do this. I don't want our government to do it, but they did it. They're doing it. His father, George Bush Sr.'s father, bank was shut down for giving and aiding the enemy, Hitler. He financed both sides of the war, which the bankers do. It's big money. War and murder and killing our young people and our young men and women. It's big business. He was financing Hitler's efforts in Germany. They shut him down. This is a matter of public record. It can be easily verified. Then the family moved their focus on the oil business, and because of politics, they became oil tycoons and very wealthy. George Bush Sr. is a 33-degree Mason, very high up in the Masonic Lodge and very high up in the New World Order. And he gave a speech in 1991 or 90, I can't remember the exact date, in which he talked a lot about the New World Order. So if you want to verify that, you just Google George Bush Sr. New World Order speech, okay? And it'll come up for you. He didn't want to see the Central Intelligence Agency, which he founded, disbanded. Eventually, he would become vice president under Ronald Reagan. And Ronald Reagan also had an attempted assassination on his life. Whereas George Bush Sr. was around, people got killed. And then after he was vice president under Ronald Reagan, he became president of the United States. So Kennedy's intentions to dismantle the CIA was certainly in direct conflict with Bush's goals of using this powerful agency as a tool of power. Now, there was a man named J. Edgar Hoover, and he was the head of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. As a very young man, I remember him always being on the news media and being well, always in the newspaper and the news media. He was a very powerful man. He was head of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. He had the dirt on all the politicians. He had the dirt on everyone. He was very powerful, and he did not want to see John Kennedy investigate the Bureau of Investigation. So Hoover was very much against John Kennedy. And then we had Lyndon B. Johnson, a congressman, and by the way, a very wealthy oil man from Texas. We got a lot of Texas presidents here, don't we? Oil Texas presidents. We got Johnson here, and we got Bush Sr., Bush Jr. He had great ambitions of becoming a president of the United States. Kennedy, after deciding to run for the presidency, had chosen another candidate as a running mate. Lyndon Johnson approached him and said that he would do everything to destroy his reputation unless he was put on the ticket. I remember Lyndon Johnson personally, and my hair would stand up, and I would cringe when he would talk about the Great Society. And he was talking about the Great Society in Vietnam after we put down the Vietnam, how we would become the Great Society after we put down China, after we put down all these Asian countries, we would be the Great Society. But he wanted to be the Great Socialistic Society, Lyndon Johnson. Kennedy couldn't stand Johnson, and Johnson couldn't stand Kennedy. But to avoid public scandal, and Kennedy succumbed to Lyndon Johnson and allowed him to be on the ticket with him as for Vice President of the United States. Now during this time, remember, I'm alive, I'm watching all this, I'm trying to sort it out. You know, I'm like any other teenager. I'm here, I'm there, I'm everywhere, but you know, my thoughts on a lot of other things, but I'm always listening to the news, you know. And Bobby Kennedy, John Kennedy's brother, is now Attorney General. And as Attorney General, he's going to crack down on the mafia bosses. And he's going to crack down on the illicit drug business. So we got the plot thickening. Johnson's secretary describes a meeting, and you'll have to look this up, in which George Bush Sr., Lyndon B. Johnson, Baines Johnson, and the mafia bosses met to discuss what to do with John F. Kennedy. After the meeting, the secretary states that Lyndon Johnson came out, spoke directly to her, and he said, "I'll never have to deal with that son of a again." And then he left the room. You've got to check this out. We're 53, 54 years from 64 or whatever, and there's so much evidence about the Kennedy assassination. There's so much fact that the back of John F. Kennedy's skull was blown out. They're trying to say Oswald shot him from the book depository, which was behind him. But a bullet, if you just know anything about a bullet, it goes in small and comes out big. And they've proven that Oswald couldn't have even got off the shots. I think they've said 3 shots fired, and there must have been a lot more than that. They had an ambush set up for him. Lyndon Johnson was riding behind him in a limousine. George Bush was there in Dallas that day. Some of the mafia bosses were there in Dallas that day. Now, riding in the limousine, Kennedy was seated on the right side of the limousine in the back seat. Jackie was seated to the left side, and in front of him was John Connally. So they tried to explain that he was shot from the depository, and the bullet went into his head, came out his neck, went into Connally, and did all kinds of just that one bullet shot everybody. When in essence, that's not really what happened. The first bullet entered on the left side of his neck, and if you watch the film, you can see him grab his neck. And then the second bullet entered his right temple area and took out a large portion of the right side of his skull. The coroner had the body was moved immediately. The coroner ended up dead a little bit afterwards. The doctors that got to see it, some of them died, but some of them that did manage to live said that the shot that killed him entered the front. It was from the front. There's great evidence that there was a manhole cover where the fatal shot got him. There's also the famous grassy knoll that was to the front of him. But you can see his head going back. They've tried to disprove this. This is not a conspiracy, friends. This is fact. They killed Abraham Lincoln, our government did, blamed it on one lone assassin, John Wilkes Booth, and they killed John F. Kennedy and blamed it on Lee Harvey Oswald. Oswald was falsely arrested, held without proper representation by a lawyer. As he was being transported to the jail, I saw this on TV. You had all these redneck policemen, and they were redneck, you know, I mean, and I love policemen, but these are Texas rednecks, you know, most of them overweight, fat, bald-headed, nothing about bald-headed, but that's just the way it was in my memory, and, you know, clean-shaven, and they look like a typical hypocrite, is what I thought they looked like, but that was an 18-year-old boy looking at it. But anyhow, here you got all these policemen. They're all armed with guns, and here's Jack Ruby, and he knew Harvey Oswald. There's evidence that he knew Harvey Oswald, and they know Jack Ruby's a local gangster, a thug, a little-time thug. They know him, and they allow him to get close enough to Oswald to shoot him. Now, Jack Ruby was a local gangster, nightclub owner. He shot him, then he was whisked away. He had terminal cancer, so I guess his family was paid off big time, whatever deal he made, but he died 6 months later. So, it was from this incident that I see that the New World Order really started taking off. I mean, it's been in the plans for since the beginning of our nation, and it's been behind the scenes for a long time. The Illuminati, you've heard that name. You've heard the Council on Foreign Relations, the Bilderberg Group. You've heard all these things, and they're all organizations that are highly connected for one purpose, and that's to establish the New World Order or Satan's kingdom, because he wants to be worshipped as God. And eventually he will sit down in a temple of God and proclaim that he is God, and he will be part of the New World Order. He will be the head of it. Anyhow, that's when the New World Order really started taking off, when Kennedy was killed. George Bush Sr. was in Dallas. Lyndon Johnson was lying on the floor of the limousine, reportedly, before even the first shot was fired. They took a different route. The security that was around the car backed off right before he was shot. People reported many shots being fired. People hit the ground, matter of fact, there were so many shots being fired. There's a preponderance of evidence, if you check it out. I hate to break anybody's fairy tale beliefs, but there's a preponderance of evidence that shows beyond a shadow of a doubt that this was a planned assassination. George Bush Sr., we knew in the spirit world, we knew as creatures of the gospel, that Lyndon Johnson was the main man in this assassination. The prophets came out during that time, and for some reason we just knew in a spirit that he was the main man. But later, Bobby Kennedy was shot and killed. Then Marilyn Monroe was shot and killed, all connected with the Kennedys. Then his son later died mysteriously in a plane wreck. And if you research that plane wreck, it shouldn't have happened. The plane wasn't even reported missing for hours and hours afterwards. I mean, it was just he was taken out because he was getting a lot of popularity. So Martin Luther King was assassinated. We lost a lot of heroes during that time. Lyndon Johnson got his war. His big construction company over there in Vietnam was under his wife's name, made millions and millions of dollars. George Bush Sr. went on to become vice president under Ronald Reagan. Like I said before, Reagan was an attempted assassination on him. The New World Order moved into prominence after Kennedy was assassinated. Lyndon Johnson, George Bush, and his sons, Bill and Hillary Clinton, Barack and Michelle Obama, have been acting as heads of the United States under the direction of the New World Order. The purpose is to take away our sovereign national laws, our Constitution, and supplant it with an atheistic, inhumane, socialistic society. Jesus said that the very elect would be deceived if it were possible. Christ is saying that deception will abound in the last days so profoundly that his church will have to use keen discernment to filter through the fog of lies in order to see the truth. 9/11 couldn't have been taken down without explosive. It was demolated. They used science. The beams were cut, and explosive were used to make it fall at free fall speed without any resistance. All the weight of the floor is just crushed it. That's not what happened. It can't happen that way. It's not the law of physics. So look at that. Kennedy was assassinated. 9/11 was another Pearl Harbor, so that we could go into the oil fields of the Mideast and control the oil and control our dollar. It was another Pearl Harbor. The Twin Towers became another Pearl Harbor that changed the world. Bin Laden was supposed to have been the one that conducted it, but we went in and got Saddam Hussein. Two great deceptions have fallen on America in the last 15 years. One is the war on terror by George Bush, changed the way the security of the world is monitored, and the second is the election of Barack Hussein Obama, a total implant by the New World Order. I just ask you to do your own research. Jesus said you would know the truth would set you free. Free is knowing and not being deceived. That's freedom. Walking in truth is walking in light and not darkness. So I hope that this helped you. And until next time, this is James Stockstill saying, keep looking for the handwriting on the wall.